We finally have the details for the apparently NCAA compliant Players Era Festival, and quite a few things have changed. And by the way, get your split screens ready now for that Tuesday night.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, the only daily national college hoop show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Shade, and you're joining me at the place to get your college basketball content every single day. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I want to thank you for making us your first listen or watch of the day and remind you that you can get every single episode ad-free on Amazon Music. Special shout out goes to all the everydayers who are joining us today and all the members of the Locked On College Basketball Discord community. So glad that you're all here. This episode is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy, which fixes tired fast. With zero sugar and a convenient portable size, it's the perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done. Go to 5hourenergy.com and use promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and can't be used with any other promotion. Go to 5hourenergy.com today. Coming up on the show today, as I said in the cold open, finally, we have the details of the Players Era Festival. Unfortunately, up in Spokane, Washington, Steele Venters and Gonzaga just can't catch a break. I feel so bad for this guy. And Zayden High, a backup forward at North Carolina, is out for this season, not injury related. We'll get to all of that coming up on the show today. So let's start out with this Players Era Festival. It's very funny. Literally, 2 days ago, was it Tuesday's show? Yeah, Tuesday's show. I talked about the doubt that had been looked at, like, hey, is this thing really going to be able to happen? Is it going to be NCAA compliant? What all's going on here? And then on Thursday, CBS Sports' Matt Norlander drops all the details for the Players Era Festival. So this is great news, all right? We want to see this event happen. It is a upsetter to the space. It changes the MTE space, obviously, because of all the money that's being thrown into this thing. But I'm just so glad to finally have the details of it and hear from what Norlander says, from what they continue to relay the Players Era Festival organizers, that everything is, as they've said it would be, NCAA compliant. So let me share the details of this whole thing with you, and then we'll make some observations about it. Because very interestingly, every single piece of this is different than what it had been initially reported. And so we'll unpack all of that. So the dates for this thing are going to be, it's during Thanksgiving week, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Saturday. That's November 26th, 27th, which is Turkey Eve, and then Saturday, November 30th. Here's our first one. Until we got this news on Wednesday, the whole thing had always been Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday. Thursday, Thanksgiving Day, is going to be off, and the third day of the event would be Saturday. No longer the case. It's Tuesday, Wednesday, Saturday. Next up in the information drop, there is only one site for this thing. It's going to be the MGM Grand Garden Arena. That's another part of one of the differences. Originally, the details were that it would be any or all of the MGM resorts, of their MGM Resorts International major venues there in Las Vegas, the Grand Garden Arena, along with T-Mobile and the Michelob Ultra Arena. So those two are out, which makes a ton of sense because there's a whole other event at T-Mobile, other college basketball games, while this is taking place. So there's that. Broadcast. How are we going to be able to watch this thing? This is the next thing that is different than had been reported for a while. The games are going to air via all of Warner Brothers Discovery channels, meaning TNT, TBS, True TV, and it will stream as well on Max. So usually we always make the jokes about, man, I got to go find True TV because it's March Madness time. Well, now you got to find it more. And this makes a ton of sense, right? Think about all the changes with the NBA and the Warner Brothers Discovery channels and not, having that anymore. And so obviously they're going to be wanting to get in on more college basketball. Here's an example of that. So again, the thought all along had been before we had heard rights hadn't been formally secured, but the expectation was that this entire event was going to be distributed and viewed on streaming services rather than a linear TV station. Well, that's not the case. Which is, whatever, fine, cool. And then the other thing, and this one we already knew, but the fourth major difference is, for a while there was speculation that we have these 8 teams. There was speculation that we would have 2 separate pods, brackets, groups, whatever you want to call them. You would play 2 games against 2 of the 3 other opponents, and then the teams with the best records would play one another. That never made much sense to me, because you're just leaving out one of the matchups, and how are you going to fully decide who play? I didn't like it. So we already knew this, but what it'll be is just 3 games, and you just play a round robin against your pod. And I think that's how the event organizers are getting around you can't have 2 teams from the same conference in your MTE, even if you can guarantee that they don't play each other. And so keeping these as isolated 4-team events is how they're doing that, because so there's 2 separate MTEs in the Impact tournament. You've got Alabama, Houston, Rutgers, and Notre Dame. In the Power MTE, the Power tournament is Texas A&M, Creighton, Oregon, San Diego State. So obviously, you can't have both Texas A&M and Alabama in the same MTE. You can't have Oregon, and Rutgers in the same MTE. So you've got them split, and there's no way these teams will overlap at all. So there you go. Now, the big thing you're probably wondering, Isaac, what is the schedule for this thing? Who's playing who when? Because really the only matchup we already knew was that we were getting Alabama and Houston on opening night. That's going to be an insane game. So here's the schedule for you, starting with Tuesday. Tipping off this whole event for the first time will be San Diego State and Creighton at 2 p.m. Eastern. That is a matchup of a wild game from a couple years ago, followed by Texas A&M and Oregon, 4:30 p.m. Eastern. Alabama and Houston will be the key game probably of this entire event, 8 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday night. And then to wrap it up on Tuesday, Notre Dame and Rutgers at 10:30 p.m. Eastern. On Wednesday, again, we just keep this round robin going. San Diego State and Oregon at 4 p.m. Creighton, Texas A&M at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. This is not local again. Alabama, Rutgers at 10 p.m. So that for me is going to be a very fun game that night to see Alabama, who should be a top, if they're not preseason number 1, they're 2, right? Against those 2 stud Rutgers freshmen. Very excited for that. Oh, and by the way, that's Cliff Omori against his former team. I just thought about that in real time. And then wrapping up Wednesday night, which it will actually be Thursday on the East Coast when this game tips, Houston and Notre Dame, 12:30 a.m. Eastern time. So there's that. Then you get Thursday off and Friday off. Got to get that Black Friday shopping done. Clearly, that's why they did that. And then Saturday, the last day to wrap this up, the team from your pod that you haven't played yet. So Alabama, Notre Dame, tipping off at 1 Eastern. So that means that'll be Las Vegas Pacific. Yeah, right? So that'll be tipping off at 10 a.m. local. Yuck. Followed by Houston and Rutgers, 3:30 Eastern. Then Texas A&M, San Diego State at 7, and Oregon versus Creighton, which is a rematch from last year, right? From the NCAA tournament last year, a crazy game at 9:30 Eastern. So we've got all those differences already, but that's what we're doing. There's the schedule. Probably the most interesting takeaway that I haven't talked about yet from this whole thing is that Tuesday night is going to be a bonkers slate of college basketball games. Here's why. Obviously, we just talked about Alabama, Houston in this event tipping off at 8 Eastern time. At 8:30 Eastern time in the Maui Invitational, in the losers bracket, it's going to be some combination of North Carolina or Dayton, whoever loses that first round game, against Auburn and Iowa State, whoever loses that first round game. So that's going to be a crazy game. Regardless, you've got 3 teams that are probably top 10 preseason in Carolina, Auburn, and Iowa State, if not top 15. At 9:00, Duke and Kansas are playing in the Vegas Showdown. Also in Vegas, that's a game going on at T-Mobile. That's why, we won't have Players Era stuff there. So in Vegas, within an hour of each other tipping off, are Bama, Houston, and Duke, Kansas. That's probably 4 top 5, top 6 preseason teams. I mean, that's wild. And then at 11 Eastern, tipping off back in Maui, is the winner's bracket of whoever wins UNC Dayton and whoever wins Auburn, Iowa State. So get your split screens ready for that Tuesday night. It is going to be insane. So again, very, very curious to see how this comes together. The questions still are flying all over the place about the financial sustainability of this event. Will they be able to make it happen? I don't know that we'll know initially until it's already happened and how that's all going to fly. So we'll keep our eyes out for it, but at least now we know the schedule, the plans around it. Moving ahead, for the second year in a row, Gonzaga loses Steele Venters for the season due to injury. But this time, Mark Few has more time and more talent to handle the loss. We'll unpack all of that in just a second. Right after I tell you about 5-hour energy, just about every day after lunch, I feel tired. Like literally right now. I'm recording this in the hours just right after lunch. It's that afternoon lull, man. But the good news, if you feel that like I do, we are not alone. In fact, research shows that more than 70% of us hit that wall after lunch. So my advice to us, let's let a 5-hour energy shot help us leap over that wall instead of crashing right smack dab into it. One of the things I've been trying to do is I've been trying to cut out some sugar as I get older. So I love that 5-hour energy has 0 sugar. Plus, it's got a convenient portable size and is the perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done. The 5-hour energy website has all these great flavors to try out: watermelon, tropical burst, grape, berry, and more. You can go try them all. And on the site, you even have the option to build your own 12-pack or your own 24-pack. You choose the flavors, and it's delivered right to your door. Just go to 5hourenergy.com. That's 5, the number, not spelled out, and get some 5-hour energy product today. You can use my promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order, this offer is only valid until September 30th on one order, and it can't be used with other promotions, and it's no good on subscription orders. Again, go to 5hourenergy.com today. Sad news for the Gonzaga Bulldogs for the second year in a row about the same player, about an injury. Last year, Steele Venters, the Eastern Washington transfer, tore his right ACL 2 days before Gonzaga's first game of the season. Gonzaga had already had craziness in the kennel. They'd already played their exhibition game, and they were slated 2 days later to face Yale in the season opener, and boom, in practice, right ACL done. This year, on Tuesday afternoon, we got the news out of Gonzaga that something had happened with Venters and left Achilles, and now he's done for the season. So different leg, different years. And so, you always wonder, like, is that because your left side was making up for your right side, or what's going on there? Compensating. That's the word I was actually looking for. But man, regardless of what's going on there, this is a massive bummer. Obviously, for Steele Venters, first and foremost, we so often think about the humanity and want to bring that side of it into the equation over and above who these guys are as basketball players. They're not robots. We'll, in fact, say that again about the situation we're going to talk about in segment 3 today. Mark Few says in the press release, quote, "We are heartbroken for Steele. He was working so hard to come back from his knee injury. We will continue to support Steele through his healing process and know that he will come back better and stronger." And we'll talk about the potentials of coming back here in just a little bit. But first, I want to get to what this means right now for Gonzaga. Because as I said, last year when this happened, 2 days before Gonzaga's first game. So number one, 2 days. This year, over 2 months of time. Today is Thursday, August 29th. Gonzaga doesn't play till early November. So we've got over 2 months to go. The other thing last year is there was not as much talent. We were projecting last year Steele Venters to be in the starting lineup playing, and then he's out, so it forced Dusty Stromer into that role. Now, we were not projecting Steele Venters to be in the starting lineup. In fact, Andy, my co-host on the show, who also hosts Locked on Zags conveniently, was projecting Steele Venters 9th on the depth chart. So this year, there's more time and there's more talent, and that to me is good news for Gonzaga, who, oh, by the way, Mark Few doesn't even really typically go beyond 8th in his depth chart. I look back at last year, and Gonzaga was like 340 something in bench usage anyway. So, that's good news from that standpoint. But really interested to see what the plan is that Coach Few and the staff will put together. Oh, there's my notes. 343rd last year in bench usage. The nice thing is coming back this year, Gonzaga had 4 returning starters in the form of Ryan Nemhard, Nolan Hickman, Ben Gregg, and Graham Ike. I think for me, Nemhard, Hickman, and Ike locked in as your 1, 2, and 5. And frankly, I think Gregg's locked in as your 4. But let's consider the possibility that I think the 6 that the starters will come from are outside of who I think is locked in with Nemhard, Hickman, and Ike. You've got Gregg, you got Michael Ajayi coming in from Pepperdine, and Caliph Battle from Arkansas. Now, it just depends on how Coach Few wants to play. Does he want to go small ball, or does he want to keep Gregg at the 4? I think that's what's going to happen, and then it will be either Michael Ajayi or Caliph Battle starting at the 3 as those bigger guards. So that's what I think is going to happen. But to me, those 6 are locked into the rotation with Braden Huff as the backup 5 for Graham Ike, and then Dusty Stromer as the 8th player in this rotation. And honestly, that's kind of where it lops off. I fully believe Steele Venters would have been a 9th player in this rotation, a little bit deeper than Mark Few typically goes. But we always say in college basketball, you really only need a strong 8 and you're good to go, particularly once we get to tournament time. But where this, to me, really, really, really hurts Gonzaga is in Steele Venters' floor stretching capability, his shooting, his spacing. I mean, this dude is deadly from outside. 2 years ago at Eastern Washington, 15.3 points a game, 16.7 the year before that. He was the Big Sky MVP in 2022-23. Career 40.3% three-point shooter on 5.2 attempts per game. Also deadly not only from outside, but the free throw line, where he shoots 84.6%. Has missed a total of 31 free throws in his entire career. That's wild and wackadoodle. So that to me is where Venters is most missed. Not in the starting lineup, not even necessarily in the main guy off the bench, but in what he will bring to, spread the floor so that Graham Ike, for example, has more room to operate, or Ben Gregg, if he's the one down in the post. So that's the issue at play. I ultimately, funny enough, similar to last year, I think that Dusty Stromer is the biggest beneficiary of this news. So we'll just have to watch how that goes. We'll keep our eyes on Tarleton transfer Emmanuel Innocenti. We'll keep our eyes on Jun Suk Yu and see how those guys factor in. But I just don't think they'll have too terribly much of a role. Another question that people are going to ask, Braden Smith is redshirting. Braden Smith, the Colgate transfer, who played 2 years at Colgate and is now coming in. People will ask the question, okay, so does he now play instead of redshirting? And I think the answer to that is no, right? Like, you don't want to waste him, and you want him sitting and learning from Ryan Nemhard, and then he can take the reins next year. So I don't think, and I think Andy would say the same, that there's no need to pull his red shirt and have him play. As for Steele Venters, man, this is tough for a kid that has always wanted to play for Gonzaga. He redshirted 2019-20, played 3 years at Eastern Washington, was out last year, was out this year, is going to be out this year, I should say, meaning that if he's able to and decides to come back, next year would be year 7 for him in college. And oh, by the way, he's still got 2 years of eligibility because of his COVID stuff. Now, I know that this year, for most people, is the last year of COVID eligibility, but Venters is going to now be one of the few outliers of that who would still have COVID eligibility beyond this. So will he play? Will he be healthy enough to play? Will he want to play? There's literally no way to know that answer right now. We're right on the front end of this. But all that to say, I think Gonzaga's going to be fine. They're going to miss Venters shooting, but Coach Few will find a way around this. And again, because he has the time and the talent to do so. And for the record, I think Gonzaga is criminally being overlooked and underrated this season. So we'll find out all about that coming up here again in just a little over 2 months. Now, North Carolina, similar to Gonzaga, has also announced on Tuesday afternoon that they were losing a player for this college basketball season, but not because of injury, for reasons that have not been yet made entirely clear. But we'll talk about what that means for Hubert Davis and his team coming up in just a second. right after I tell you about Factor. Hey, fuel up with Factor's no prep, no mess meals. Meet your wellness goals thanks to the menu of chef crafted meals with options like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. So no matter how busy you are, there's no excuses, y'all. You'll always have time to enjoy nutritious, great tasting meals. So why not make today the day that you kickstart a new healthy routine? What are you waiting for? Because with over 35 different meals and more than 60 add-ons to choose from every week, you'll always have new flavors to explore with Factor. So treat yourself to restaurant quality meals that feature premium ingredients like filet mignon, shrimp, and blackened salmon. Holy smokes, my mouth is watering. Head to factormeals.com/lockedoncollege50 and use code lockedoncollege50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your second month. That's code lockedoncollege50 at factormeals.com/lockedoncollege50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active. This episode of Locked On College Basketball is also brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, you heard us talk so much this summer about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, and usually we're letting you know about getting a boost or a bonus daily from FanDuel. Well, we got something a little bit different for you now as we get into the fall, because now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. All you got to do is with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out of market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel at any time. How about some of the highest profile college football games of week 1? I got a couple lines for you here. Clemson and Georgia, man, dogs are favored by 13.5 points. That ain't going to be a game. Texas A&M favored by 2.5 over Notre Dame, and LSU by 4.5 over USC. But the game I'm most excited about is Miami and Florida with the Hurricanes and our friend Alex Dono, the host of Locked On Hurricanes, favored by 2.5. If you want to get in on any of that action, visit fanduel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. We just talked about Gonzaga being without Steele Venters for the season, expected depth coming off the bench at Gonzaga. If you want to hear more on that, make sure to check out Locked On Zags with my good friend Andy Patton. But now we're going to talk about a North Carolina reserve who will also be missing from the team this season, and that is forward Zayden High, who is a sophomore. This one is not due to an injury. Here's the beats of it. We learned this news publicly on Tuesday. I was actually apprised of this situation by a source on Monday afternoon, the fact that Zayden High would not be with the Tar Heels for 2024-25. So from my source, here's the current plan of what's going on with Zayden High and the Tar Heels. Zayden High is not enrolled at North Carolina for this fall semester. The plan is for him to be back on campus as a student in the spring of 2025, this upcoming spring. However, he will not play this entire season. Whether it's a formal redshirt or just not playing is a little up in the air. But the current plan is that he will be back playing for the Tar Heels next year and still have that 3 years of eligibility left. Now, I say current plan very specifically because we all know how it is in this day and age, right? Things could change at the drop of a hat. And truthfully, all of this is true. I don't know why I say truthfully, like I was lying to you before. I mean, the reality of the situation is that there's just not much being said publicly about what's going on here. All we know is that there is some sort of off the court issue that's happening with Zayden High in the school. There is nothing legal that's going on. He's not facing anything of a legal matter that he's having to deal with. And so that's all we have to say on that side of it. And so, you never want to see this. So hopefully whatever's going on will come out and we can talk about more. But for now, this is what we know. But what we can talk about is what it means for the Tar Heels ahead of this season. By the way, we do need to be specific with our language. I had seen at least one other national college basketball media personality say that Zayden High had been dismissed from the Tar Heels. That's not true, because from what we know, the plan is that he will be back with the team. So this is just a 1 semester away from school, and then he'll be back, and then he'll be back playing. Again, that's the current plan. So what does this mean for the Tar Heels? Well, if you're watching on YouTube, I actually have North Carolina's scholarship chart pulled up of how things sit this year. This means that Carolina is down to 11 of their 13 scholarships. And as a reminder, we're assuming that we're going to be up to around 15 scholarships in 25, 26 and beyond. But this is where things sit today for North Carolina. Obviously, we know that this backcourt is expected to be loaded, one of the top backcourts in the country, with returning first-team All-American RJ Davis and his backcourt starting mate, Elliot Cadeau, who's going to be a sophomore this year. The Tar Heels bring in uber-talented freshman Ian Jackson. Seth Trimble, the junior who entered the transfer portal, ultimately decided to come back, will round out that backcourt. Carolina brings in Belmont transfer Cade Tyson, and also the other freshman expected to get a lot of playing time, Drake Powell. Those guys will probably play the three. Cade Tyson might be a small ball forward. It just depends on what Hubert Davis wants to do. And this news might factor into that as well. The questions for North Carolina all offseason have been actually in the front court. That's what we're looking at and trying to figure out. In some ways, this Zayden High news makes things even more of a question in the front court for North Carolina. In other ways, maybe a silver lining for Hubert Davis and his staff, it unmuddies the front court picture a little bit and allows them to have a little bit more clarity. So what Zayden High's absence leaves in the front court for Hubert Davis is Jalen Washington, Jalen Withers, the Louisville transfer in his second year with the Tar Heels, Vanderbilt transfer Ven Allen Lubin, who's a junior, has 2 years of eligibility, Tyjon Claude, the most recent addition to North Carolina's roster, who comes over from Georgia Tech, has 1 year of eligibility, and then freshman James Brown, the player we project, at least with Zayden High on the roster, projected to not really see much of any time this year. That might change. I think, though, the 4 guys that are really going to be in the mix for playing time in the front court are those 2 Jalens, Washington and Withers, along with Ven Allen Lubin and Tyjon Claude. Now, the other question is, does Hubert Davis decide to go smaller and utilize like Cade Tyson at the 4, maybe even Drake Powell? We'll just have to see what works out there. And then that allows you to just out of that quartet of Jalen Washington, Jalen Withers, Lubin, and Claude, just use Washington or, whatever that may be. And so we're going to have to wait and see on that. But certainly for a front court that either for a coaching staff that either missed or backed off of multiple players this offseason, this is another thorn in the side, because as you're trying to figure out like what pieces are going to work at some level, you really want to have options, right? Mitigate the risk. That's what I do like at the back end of a fantasy football draft, right? You get guys with potential, but that you don't really know how they fit. That's kind of what Carolina has in this front court. So we're going to have to keep our eyes on it and see what happens. And we'll also keep our eyes on this situation and ears out to hear if we get any more firm information about what the situation actually is and what's going on. So there you go. 2 of probably the top 10, 15 programs in America each loses a bench player for the season. And always interesting to see things like that happening. And so our thoughts go out to both Steele Venters and his family and Zayden High and his family. All right, guys, that wraps it up for today's episode of Locked On College Basketball. Thanks so much for joining me here today. On tomorrow's show, Andy Patton will be right back with me, and we'll just have all sorts of great content to get you ready for the weekend. If you haven't subscribed to the show already, please make sure to do that both on YouTube and on audio formats. If you haven't joined our Locked On College Basketball Discord community, we would love to have you in there. The link is in the show notes, and it's 100% free to join. We've been talking all day today about all sorts of different information and things going on in there as well. Want to say, as always, apologies to the Lawyer family. Let's go Wildcats, and until tomorrow, peace.